The rain poured down like a flood, turning the empty yard into a muddy swamp. A thick, rusted chain clanked against the metal pole as a German shepherd, his fur soaked and dirty, pulled weakly against it. His ribs showed through his skin. Days without food had left him starving. The water was rising, inching closer to his paws. He let out a low whine, his golden eyes scanning the broken-down house behind him. No one had come out in days. No voice called his name. A car splashed through the road nearby, but no one stopped. The dog lowered his head, shivering. Then, just as his eyes started to close from exhaustion, a shadow fell over him. A woman stood there, her boots sinking into the mud. She stared at the chain, then at the dog. His ears twitched. Was this another person who would walk away? The woman didn't move. Instead, she whispered, "Oh my God, how long have you been here?" The dog lifted his head slightly, watching her. She stepped closer, her hands trembling as she reached for the lock on his collar. The chain was so tight it had rubbed his neck raw. "Who could do this to you?" she murmured, her voice shaking with anger. The lock clicked open. For the first time in months, the German shepherd felt the weight of the chain disappear. But before he could even take a step, his legs gave out. He collapsed into the mud, too weak to stand. The woman didn't hesitate. She knelt beside him, pulling off her coat to wrap around his trembling body. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're safe now." But as she lifted him into her arms, a voice shouted from the house, "Hey, that's my dog!" The woman froze. A man stood in the doorway, his face twisted in anger. The German shepherd let out a weak growl, his body tensing. The woman held him tighter. "Not anymore," she said. The man stumbled forward, his boots kicking up mud as he lurched toward the woman and the weakened German shepherd. His breath reeked of alcohol, his bloodshot eyes narrowing into slits. "That's my property," he slurred, pointing a shaking finger at the dog. The woman didn't back down. She adjusted her grip on the trembling animal, feeling his rapid heartbeat against her chest. "Property," she shot back, her voice sharp. "This is a living creature. Look at him. He's skin and bones. The water was about to drown him." The man scoffed, wiping rainwater from his face. "He's fine, just a dumb animal." Behind him, the flooded house creaked ominously, a loose shutter banging against the rotting wood. The dog let out a low, pained whimper, his ears flattening against his skull as memories of harsh kicks and empty food bowls flashed through his mind. The woman's jaw tightened. She had seen enough. Turning away, she began marching toward her car, the dog's weight heavy in her arms, but the drunk man wasn't done. "You ain't taking him," he roared, surging forward. His hand clamped down on her shoulder, spinning her around. The sudden movement startled the dog. Instinct took over. With the last of his strength, the German shepherd lunged, teeth bared, snapping just inches from the man's face. The man yelped, staggering back and tripping over a broken crate. He landed hard in the mud, cursing. The woman didn't wait. She sprinted the last few feet to her car, yanking the door open and sliding inside with the dog still clutched against her. The engine roared to life as the man scrambled to his feet, shouting obscenities. Gravel sprayed as she reversed, then sped down the road. In the back seat, the dog lay panting, his body spent. The woman glanced at him through the rearview mirror, her hands shaking on the wheel. "It's okay," she whispered, more to herself than him. "You're safe now." But the dog wasn't so sure. His entire life had been chains and hunger. What if this was just another temporary stop before more pain? His drooping eyes watched the raindrops race down the window, the world outside a blur. An hour later, they arrived at a small veterinary clinic. The woman carried him inside, rushing past the waiting area straight to the counter. Please, she said urgently to the wide-eyed receptionist. He needs help now. A vet emerged within seconds, taking one look at the emaciated dog and ushering them into an exam room. As the woman set him gently on the table, the vet's expression darkened. Dehydration, severe malnutrition, infected wounds from the collar, and these old fractures. The vet traced a finger over poorly healed breaks in the dog's ribs. The woman's stomach twisted. Will he make it? The vet hesitated. It'll be close, but he's strong. Look at his eyes, he's still fighting. As the vet worked, administering fluids and cleaning wounds, the woman stroked the dog's head. He flinched at first, unused to gentle touch, but slowly, his tense muscles relaxed. You need a name, she murmured. Outside, thunder rumbled. The lights flickered. The dog's ears perked up, not at the storm, but at the distant sound of tires screeching to a halt outside the clinic. The woman didn't notice, but the dog did. His body stiffened. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps approached the building. The scent hit him before the door burst open. Whiskey, sweat, rage. The drunk man stood in the doorway, his face purple with fury. You stole my dog, he bellowed. The vet froze. The receptionist gasped, and the German shepherd, though weak, let out a deep, warning growl. The woman stepped between them, her voice ice cold. Leave, now, or I call the police. The man laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You think I care? That dog's mine. I'll take him back one way or another. He took a threatening step forward, just as the clinic's back door creaked open. A shadow moved. A low, guttural snarl echoed through the room. Everyone turned. There, teeth bared and hackles raised, stood a massive Rottweiler, the clinic's guard dog. The drunk man paled. The Rottweiler took one step, then another. The man stumbled back, his bravado crumbling. This ain't over, he spat before fleeing into the storm. Silence fell. The woman exhaled shakily. The vet let out a nervous laugh. Well, that was something. But the German shepherd wasn't relaxed. His eyes stayed locked on the door, because he knew men like that didn't give up, and the worst was yet to come. The storm raged outside the clinic, rain hammering against the windows like desperate fists trying to break in. The German shepherd lay on the examination table, his body exhausted but his mind alert, ears twitching at every sound. The woman, Emily, as the vet had called her, kept one hand resting gently on his side, her touch warm against his cold, damp fur. The vet finished bandaging the worst of his wounds and stepped back with a sigh. He's stable for now, but he'll need round-the-clock care for weeks, she said, peeling off her gloves. Those old injuries, someone really did a number on him. Emily's fingers curled slightly into the dog's fur, her jaw tightening. What kind of monster could do this? She muttered, more to herself than anyone else. The dog lifted his head just enough to nudge her hand with his nose, a silent thank you that made her eyes soften. Across the room, the Rottweiler, Max, the clinic's guard dog, watched them with dark, intelligent eyes. He hadn't stopped pacing since the drunk man's abrupt exit, his heavy paws thudding against the tiled floor. The vet noticed his agitation and frowned. Max isn't usually this worked up, she murmured. The German shepherd's ears pricked forward. He could sense it too, the tension in the air, the unnatural stillness outside despite the storm. Something was wrong. A loud crash from the back of the clinic made everyone jump. Max erupted into furious barking, his massive body lunging toward the sound. The vet grabbed a metal tray in reflex, her face pale. What the hell? The words died in her throat as the back door burst open. Not just the drunk man this time. 3 figures spilled into the room, their faces hidden beneath hoods, one of them swinging a crowbar. The German shepherd tried to stand, his legs shaking, a growl building in his chest. Emily instinctively stepped in front of him, her arms spread. "Get out!" she shouted, her voice trembling but fierce. The lead intruder, tall, with a scar across his knuckles, laughed. "We're not here for you, lady. Hand over the dog, and no one gets hurt." Max lunged, his teeth snapping dangerously close to the man's arm. A second intruder swung the crowbar. The sickening thud of metal hitting flesh echoed through the room as Max yelped and stumbled back, blood matting his fur. The German shepherd snarled, his weakened body flooding with adrenaline. He couldn't fight, not like this, but he wouldn't let them take him back. Not to the chains, not to the hunger. Emily grabbed a scalpel from the vet's tray, her hands steady now. "You touch him, and I swear to God—" One of the intruders moved toward her, but before he could take another step, the clinic's front door flew open with a bang. A flashlight beam cut through the dim room, blinding. "Police! Everyone on the ground!" The intruders froze. The German shepherd's ears flattened against his skull at the deafening sound of sirens, his body instinctively pressing closer to Emily. Chaos erupted. The intruders scrambled, one bolting for the back door, another swinging wildly at the officers. The lead cop, a broad-shouldered man with a graying beard, tackled the crowbar-wielding assailant to the ground while his partner chased the others. Within minutes, it was over. Handcuffs clicked. The intruders were dragged outside, their threats fading into the storm. The officer holstered his weapon and turned to Emily, his expression grim. "You okay, ma'am?" Emily nodded shakily, her grip on the scalpel finally loosening. They were after the dog," she managed. The officer's gaze shifted to the German shepherd, taking in his injuries, the way he leaned against Emily like she was the only solid thing in the world. His mouth tightened. "That drunk you chased off earlier? He's got connections. Bad ones. Dog-fighting ring." The word sent a ripple of disgust through the room. The vet cursed under her breath. The German shepherd didn't understand the words, but he understood the tension in Emily's body, the way her hands shook as she stroked his head. He licked her wrist once, a silent promise. He wouldn't let them take her either. The officer rubbed his forehead. "Look, this isn't safe. They know where you are. They'll be back." Emily's voice was steel. "Then what do I do?" The officer hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a set of keys. "I've got a cabin, remote. No one knows about it but me. You and the dog stay there tonight. Tomorrow, we figure this out." Emily looked down at the German shepherd. His golden eyes met hers, steady despite the pain. She knew then. There was no choice. They were in this together now. As they followed the officer into the storm, the German shepherd limped at Emily's side, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. The rain soaked through his fur again, but this time it felt different. This time, he wasn't alone. And somewhere in the darkness, watching from a parked car across the street, a cigarette glowed red as a voice muttered into a phone. "Yeah, I found them." The police cruiser's headlights cut through the sheets of rain as they wound up the narrow mountain road, trees bending under the force of the storm. Emily sat in the back seat with the German shepherd curled at her feet, his head resting heavily on her boot. Every bump in the road made him wince, but he refused to close his eyes, not when danger still lurked in the shadows. Officer Grady, the bearded cop who'd saved them, kept glancing in the rearview mirror, his grip tight on the wheel. "Almost there?" he muttered, more to himself than to them. The cabin appeared suddenly, a dark silhouette against the storm-lit sky, its wooden porch creaking in the wind. Grady didn't park in front. Instead, he killed the lights and rolled to a stop behind a thick cluster of pines, the car hidden from view. "Just in case," he said quietly, handing Emily the keys. The German Shepherd stiffened as the car door opened, his nose twitching at the unfamiliar scents. Pine resin, wet earth, and something else, something metallic that didn't belong. Before Emily could step out, he let out a low, warning growl, his ears swiveling toward the tree line. Grady froze, his hand hovering near his holster. "What is it, boy?" A branch snapped, then another. The German Shepherd's hackles rose as a figure emerged from the darkness. Not one of the intruders from earlier, but a teenage boy, his face streaked with mud, his clothes torn. He couldn't have been older than 16, his eyes wide with fear as he raised shaking hands. Please," he stammered. "I didn't know where else to go." Grady's stance relaxed slightly, but his voice stayed sharp. "Who are you?" The boy swallowed hard. "My name's Jake. I was with them, the men who came after the dog, but I didn't know what they were really doing until tonight." Emily's breath caught. The German Shepherd let out a quiet whine, sensing the boy's terror, the truth in his scent. Jake's gaze dropped to the dog, his face crumpling. "They made me help train the fighting dogs. But this one, he was different. He wouldn't fight. They kept him chained up as bait to make the others angrier." His voice broke. "When I saw you take him tonight, I thought maybe he had a chance. But then they sent the others after you, and I ran." Grady exchanged a look with Emily. The German Shepherd limped forward, sniffing at Jake's trembling fingers. The boy didn't pull away. Instead, he slowly knelt, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The dog hesitated, then licked his hand once. A distant engine roared to life somewhere down the mountain. Headlights flickered through the trees. Grady cursed. "They're coming! Inside! Now!" The cabin was small, just one room with a wood stove and a threadbare couch. Grady barred the door, while Emily helped the German Shepherd onto a rug by the fire. Jake hovered near the window, peering through the rain-streaked glass. "They'll find us here," he said hoarsely. Grady checked his revolver. "Not if I can help it." The German Shepherd's ears pricked. Tires crunched on gravel outside, doors slammed. Then silence. Too quiet. Emily's pulse pounded in her throat. The dog tried to stand, his legs shaking, but Jake gently pressed him back down. "Don't," the boy murmured. "You'll hurt yourself." A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Not a kick, not a battering ram, just 3 slow, deliberate raps. Grady motioned for silence and called out, "Who's there?" A woman's voice answered, calm and clear. "Officer Grady?" "It's Dr. Hayes from the clinic. Max, the Rottweiler. He's hurt bad. He needs you." Emily's eyes widened. "That's the vet." But the German Shepherd growled, low and deep. Something was wrong. He knew that scent. Not just the vet's, but the sharp tang of blood, the acrid stench of gun oil. Grady must have sensed it too. He mouthed one word. "Trap." The knock came again, harder this time. "Please, he's dying." Jake's face paled. "That's not the vet," he whispered. "That's Lena. She works for them. She's the one who stitches up the dogs after fights." The German Shepherd's lips peeled back from his teeth. Outside, the vet's voice turned icy. "Last chance, Grady. Open the door, or we burn the whole place down." A new sound cut through the night, not the storm, not the intruders, but the distant wail of sirens, real ones. The German Shepherd's ears shot forward. Grady grinned, sudden and fierce. "Back up," he breathed. Outside, shouts erupted. Tires screeched. The cabin's door shuddered under a final, furious kick, then nothing. Silence. Jake sagged against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Emily clutched the German Shepherd's fur, her hands trembling. Grady kept his gun raised, his eyes locked on the door. The dog let out a slow, shaky exhale. The sirens grew louder, but so did the sound of footsteps circling the cabin. And then, a single, unmistakable click of a shotgun being cocked. The shotgun's click echoed through the cabin like a death sentence. Emily's breath hitched as she pressed closer to the German Shepherd, her fingers buried in his fur. The dog's muscles tensed beneath her touch. His golden eyes locked on the window where shadows now moved with deliberate purpose. Officer Grady motioned sharply for silence, his revolver steady as he positioned himself between the door and Emily. Jake had gone utterly still, his back pressed to the wall, eyes wide with the terrified realization that these men wouldn't hesitate to kill a kid who'd betrayed them. Outside, the sirens wailed closer, but not close enough. A voice cut through the storm, rough and mocking. "Grady, you in there? We just want to talk." The German Shepherd's lip curled, recognizing that voice. The drunk from the flooded house, the one who'd chained him for years, the one who'd laughed when he kicked him. The dog's body trembled, not from fear, but from something darker, something primal. Emily felt it and tightened her grip on his collar. "Easy," she whispered, though her own voice shook. Grady didn't take the bait. "You're surrounded, Davis," he shouted back. "Backup's 2 minutes out. Walk away now, and you might live through the night." A harsh laugh answered him. "Funny thing about backup, highway patrol's got a pile up on the Ridge Road. They ain't coming." A pause. Then softer, venomous. "Hand over the boy and the dog, and we let the woman go." Jake made a choked sound. The German Shepherd lunged forward with a snarl, his claws scrabbling against the wooden floor, but Emily yanked him back. "No!" she hissed. Grady's jaw clenched. "Stay behind me," he ordered, but the words barely registered because the cabin's front window exploded inward in a shower of glass. The German Shepherd reacted on instinct. He threw himself at the shadowy figure clambering through the window, his teeth sinking into an arm. A scream, a gunshot, deafening in the small space. Plaster rained from the ceiling. Emily screamed Grady's name as the officer fired back, but the room was chaos, smoke and shouts, and the coppery tang of blood thick in the air. The dog didn't let go, even when a boot connected with his ribs. He held on, shaking his head like he'd been trained to do in the fighting ring, and the man's screams turned shrill. Then, a second gunshot. The German Shepherd yelped as a bullet grazed his flank, hot pain searing through him. He collapsed, panting, just as the cabin door burst open. Not the intruders, not help. Lena. The woman from outside stood framed in the doorway, her pretty face twisted into something ugly, a pistol in her hand. "Enough!" she spat, aiming straight at Emily. The German Shepherd tried to rise, tried to put himself between them, but his legs wouldn't obey. Jake moved faster. The boy lunged, knocking Lena off balance. Her shot went wide, embedding in the wall. Grady pivoted, but before he could fire, the drunk, Davis, barreled into him from the window, sending both men crashing to the floor. The German Shepherd watched, helpless, as Davis raised a knife. A new sound split the air, not sirens, howling, deep, guttural, and close, too close. Lena froze. Davis hesitated. Even Grady went still, because pouring out of the tree line, eyes glinting in the dark, were dogs. Dozens of them. Big ones, small ones, mutts and purebreds. All scarred, all missing chunks of fur or ears, all moving as one. The fighting ring's rejects, the ones who'd survived. And at their head, limping but determined, was Max the Rottweiler, his teeth bared in a bloody grin. Lena paled, "Oh, God," she whispered. The German shepherd dragged himself upright, his growl joining the chorus. Davis scrambled back, his bravado crumbling. "They're just dogs," he shouted, but his voice cracked. Max took a step forward, then another. The pack surged. The cabin erupted into chaos as the pack of dogs surged forward like a living tide of teeth and fury. Lena screamed, firing her pistol wildly into the mass of animals, but there were too many, far too many. A scarred pit bull latched onto her leg, dragging her down as a wiry greyhound mix went straight for her gun hand. Davis, still tangled with Grady on the floor, barely had time to raise his knife before Max was on him, the Rottweiler's massive jaws closing around his wrist with a sickening crunch. The German shepherd tried to stand, his wounded flank burning, but Emily held him back, her arms wrapped protectively around his neck. "No, no, you're hurt," she pleaded. But the dog's eyes remained locked on the fight, his body trembling with the need to join his brothers in vengeance. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning splitting the sky in jagged streaks that illuminated the nightmare unfolding inside the cabin. Jake had pressed himself into a corner, his hands over his ears as the sounds of snarling and human screams filled the air. One of the intruders, a hulking man with a crowbar, managed to swing wildly, connecting with a collie's ribs and sending the dog skidding across the floor. The German shepherd saw red. With a sudden lunge, he tore free from Emily's grasp and launched himself at the man, his teeth sinking deep into the arm holding the crowbar. The man howled, dropping the weapon as he staggered back, but the dog didn't let go. He shook his head violently, the way he'd been forced to do in the ring, the way that had made men cheer as blood sprayed the dirt. Grady, finally free from Davis, scrambled for his fallen revolver just as the cabin's back door burst open. More figures spilled inside, but these weren't attackers. Uniformed officers, their guns drawn, flooded the room, shouting commands. The German shepherd released his grip immediately, backing toward Emily with his tail tucked, the fight draining out of him as the reality of the situation crashed down. The pack of dogs hesitated, some still growling, others limping away to lick their wounds. Max, panting heavily, finally released Davis's mangled wrist and sat back on his haunches, his dark eyes scanning the room as if assessing the damage. The lead officer, a woman with a buzz cut and a no-nonsense glare, surveyed the scene with a raised eyebrow. "Well," she said dryly, holstering her weapon as her cuffs clicked around Lena's wrists, "this isn't what I expected when dispatch said officer needs assistance." Grady, bleeding from a gash on his forehead, managed a tired grin. "You're late, Ramirez." Emily rushed to the German shepherd's side, her hands fluttering over his fresh wounds. "You idiot," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "You reckless, loyal idiot." The dog leaned into her touch, his tail giving a feeble wag. Jake, still shaking, edged closer. Are they all from the fighting ring?" he asked quietly, staring at the assembled dogs. Grady nodded grimly. "Looks like they tracked us, must have followed Max's scent." Ramirez crouched beside Davis, who was whimpering as a paramedic wrapped his destroyed wrist. "You're lucky to be alive," she remarked coolly. Davis spat blood onto the floor. "Lucky? Those monsters," Max growled. Low, warning. Davis shut up. Outside, the storm finally began to ease, the rain slowing to a drizzle. The German shepherd let his head droop against Emily's knee, exhaustion pulling at his bones. It was over. Really over. Then why did the hair on the back of his neck still prickle? Ramirez's radio crackled to life. "Unit 12, be advised. We've got a black SUV speeding away from the scene, heading north on Old Mill Road. Registered to a known associate of Davis's. Over." Grady's smile vanished. Who's in it? A pause, then, unknown. But witnesses report hearing. Barking. Over. The German Shepherd's head snapped up. Barking. Not just any barking. The high frantic yips of puppies. The sound he'd heard in the darkest parts of the fighting ring. The sound that always came before the men took the youngest dogs away to start their training. Emily met his gaze, her face pale. "They took more," she whispered. And just like that, the dog was on his feet again, his pain forgotten. Because it wasn't over, not even close. The German Shepherd's entire body trembled with urgency as he paced the length of the cabin, his claws clicking against the wooden floor. The pain from his wounds was nothing compared to the fire burning in his chest. The desperate need to chase after those puppies. Emily watched him, her own hand shaking as she pressed a clean bandage to his bleeding flank. "We have to go after them," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of steel. Grady exchanged a glance with Officer Ramirez, who was still securing Lena's cuffs. "That SUV's got a 10-minute head start," Ramirez said grimly. "By the time we mobilize—" Jake suddenly pushed off from the wall, his face set in a way that made him look years older. "I know where they're going," he interrupted. All eyes turned to him. The German Shepherd stopped pacing, his ears pricking forward. Jake swallowed hard but didn't back down. "There's an old meat-packing plant north of here, abandoned. They use the freezer trucks to transport the dogs. No one checks them." Grady's expression darkened. "You're sure?" Jake nodded, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "I helped load dogs there last month. They'll be heading there now. It's the only place they can stash the pups quick." The German Shepherd didn't wait for more discussion. He bolted for the door, shouldering past the officers, his nose already working overtime to catch the fading scent of the SUV. Emily lunged after him, grabbing his collar just before he could disappear into the night. "Wait," she pleaded, dropping to her knees in front of him. His golden eyes burned into hers, wild and determined. She understood. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, but we do this smart." Standing, she turned to Grady. "Give me your keys." Grady blinked. "What?" "The cabin's ATV. You said it was out back for emergencies. That SUV's on back roads. We can cut them off at the mill crossing before they reach the plant." Emily held out her hand, unwavering. The German Shepherd pressed against her leg, his entire body vibrating with readiness. Grady opened his mouth to argue, but Ramirez beat him to it. "Do it," she said, tossing Emily a flashlight from her belt. "We'll follow with backup. Just don't get yourselves killed." The ATV's engine roared to life like a living thing, its headlights cutting through the lingering rain. Emily barely waited for Jake to climb on behind her before gunning it down the muddy path, the German Shepherd running alongside, his powerful strides keeping pace effortlessly. The wind tore at their clothes, the cold night air sharp with the scent of pine and impending danger. Jake clung to Emily's waist, shouting directions over the engine's growl. "Left up ahead, then straight for 2 miles." The German Shepherd's nose never stopped working. Beneath the mud and gasoline, he could still catch traces of the SUV, oil, blood, and most importantly, the terrified pheromones of the puppies trapped inside. His muscles burned, his wounds screamed, but he pushed harder. These were his to protect, his to save. The ATV skidded around a bend, nearly tipping before Emily righted it with a curse. Suddenly, Jake stiffened behind her. "Stop!" he yelled. Emily slammed the brakes just as the German Shepherd froze mid-stride, his body going rigid. There, blocking the narrow road ahead, was a fallen tree, freshly cut, judging by the gleaming axe marks. A trap. Before they could react, headlights flared to life from the trees on either side. Two pickup trucks, their beds filled with armed men, rolled forward to box them in. The German shepherd snarled, positioning himself between Emily and the nearest threat. A door creaked open, and a figure stepped into the ATV's headlights. A man in a tailored suit, his polished shoes gleaming despite the mud. Not some low-level thug, the boss. "Well," the man said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey, "looks like we caught ourselves some strays." Jake made a choked sound. "That's him," he whispered, his fingers digging into Emily's jacket. "That's the one they call the vet, not because he helps dogs, because he—" The man smiled, adjusting his cufflinks. "Because I specialize in behavioral modification," he finished pleasantly. His cold eyes landed on the German shepherd. "Like this one, though I must say, I'm disappointed in your performance tonight. All that training, wasted." He sighed. "No matter. We'll start fresh with the new stock." He nodded to one of his men, who yanked open the back of a truck, revealing a cage filled with whimpering puppies. The German shepherd lunged without thinking. A gun cocked. The vet tutted. Ah. One more step, and I put a bullet in your woman's pretty head." Emily's breath came fast, but her voice didn't shake. "What do you want?" The vet's smile widened. "Why, you, of course, a veterinarian with your skills, and a boy who knows all our locations." He spread his hands. "You're too valuable to waste. Join us, or die." Behind him, one of the puppies let out a high, pained yip. The German shepherd's hackles rose. Then, from the darkness beyond the headlights came a sound that made even the vet pause. A howl, then another, and another. The pack had followed, and they weren't alone. The howls multiplied, echoing through the trees like a living wall of sound, making the armed men shift uneasily in their trucks. The German shepherd's ears swiveled. He recognized Max's deep baying among the chorus, but there were others too. New voices, wild voices. The vet's polished smile faltered for just a second before he regained control, snapping his fingers at his men. "Lights, now!" Blinding spotlights flared to life atop the trucks, sweeping the surrounding forest. What they revealed sent a ripple of shock through everyone. Wolves. At least a dozen, their gray coats bristling, yellow eyes gleaming in the artificial light. And among them, standing shoulder to shoulder like some unthinkable alliance, were the fighting dogs from the cabin. Max at the front, his wounded leg held awkwardly off the ground but his teeth bared in defiance. The vet actually took a step back, his polished shoe sinking into the mud. "Impossible," he breathed. Emily seized the moment of distraction. Her elbow snapped back into Jake's ribs, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to make him gasp and let go. Then she was moving, rolling off the ATV and hitting the ground, running straight for the puppy cage. The German shepherd didn't hesitate. He launched himself at the nearest armed guard, his teeth closing around the man's wrist before the gun could swing toward Emily. A shot rang out wild into the trees as man and dog went down in a tangle of limbs. Chaos erupted. The wolves attacked first. Not the humans, but the tires of the trucks, their powerful jaws shredding rubber with terrifying efficiency. One vehicle listed dangerously to the side, its armed occupants spilling out with shouts of alarm. Max and the other dogs surged forward, not as a disorganized mob but with chilling precision, targeting weapons, going for throats, working as a pack in a way no fighting ring had ever trained them to. The vet screamed orders, his veneer of calm shattered as he fumbled for a pistol in his waistband. Emily reached the cage, her fingers scrambling with the rusted latch. Inside, 6 puppies cowered, their tiny bodies trembling. "It's okay," she whispered frantically. "It's okay." The latch gave way just as a hand fisted in her hair, yanking her backward. The vet's breath was hot against her ear, his pistol pressed to her temple. "Enough!" he roared. Everything froze. The German shepherd, still pinning his opponent, went rigid. The wolves stopped mid-lunge. Even Max halted, his bloodied muzzle dripping onto the dirt road. The vet's grip on Emily's hair tightened. "Drop the guns," he ordered his remaining men. "We're leaving, with the woman and the shepherd. I want him collared and muzzled." His lips curled. "Let's see how well he fights when I—" A blur of motion from the trees. Something hit the vet like a freight train, knocking him clean off his feet. Emily stumbled free as man and attacker rolled across the ground in a whirl of snarls and flying dirt. When they finally stilled, the entire forest seemed to hold its breath. Standing over the vet, one massive paw pinning his chest, was the biggest wolf any of them had ever seen. Pure white with a scar running down its muzzle. Its teeth bared inches from the man's throat. The vet stared up, his face drained of color, his pistol lying useless in the mud several feet away. The white wolf didn't bite. It spoke. "Run!" it growled in a voice like cracking bones. And the vet, the monster who'd orchestrated countless dogfights, who'd broken animals and men alike, screamed like a child. The German shepherd didn't question the impossibility of what he'd just heard. He was already moving, herding Emily and Jake toward the ATV as the puppies scrambled after them. Behind them, the armed men were fleeing into the woods, their weapons abandoned. The vet remained pinned under that white paw, sobbing openly now as the wolf leaned closer, its hot breath fogging his designer glasses. Max limped up to the German shepherd, his dark eyes flicking meaningfully toward the remaining trucks. The message was clear. Go. Now Emily didn't need telling twice. She revved the ATV's engine, Jake clinging to her with one arm while the other cradled two puppies. The German shepherd leapt onto the back, his body forming a protective barrier around the remaining 4 pups who huddled at his feet. As they sped away, the last thing they saw was the white wolf throwing its head back in a howl that shook the trees, a sound that was answered not just by its pack, but by every dog on that road. The message was unmistakable. This territory was no longer man's, it was theirs. The ATV's engine screamed as Emily pushed it to its limits, the wheels kicking up mud and pine needles in their frantic escape. Jake clung to her waist with one arm, the other cradling 2 shivering puppies against his chest. The German shepherd stood braced on the back, his body forming a living barrier around the remaining 4 pups who whimpered at his feet. The wind tore at their fur, carrying with it the fading sounds of chaos from the road behind them, the panicked shouts of men, the triumphant howls of wolves, and beneath it all, a single gunshot that made the dog's ears flatten against his skull. Emily didn't look back. She couldn't. Her knuckles were white on the handlebars, her entire body thrumming with adrenaline as they hurtled down the dark forest path. Jake shouted over the roar of the engine, "The mill crossing's just ahead." "If we can make it to—" his words cut off, as the ATV's headlights suddenly illuminated a figure standing in the middle of the road. Emily barely had time to swerve, the vehicle skidding dangerously as they narrowly avoided plowing straight into Officer Grady, who stood with his revolver drawn and his uniform streaked with blood. Ramirez was beside him, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness as she waved them down. "Stop! It's clear ahead!" Emily slammed the brakes, the ATV fishtailing to a stop just feet from the officers. Grady's eyes immediately locked onto the puppies, then flicked to the blood matting the German shepherd's fur. "Christ," he muttered, holstering his weapon. "They had more?" Jake nodded numbly, his arms tightening around the pups. Ramirez was already on her radio, calling for animal control and backup, but Grady grabbed Emily's shoulder before she could speak. "Where's the vet?" The German shepherd's growl answered before Emily could. From the darkness behind them, carried on the wind, came the distant sound of engines revving to life. Not the trucks they'd left behind, but new vehicles. Faster ones. Emily's blood ran cold. "They're coming," she breathed. Grady didn't hesitate. He yanked open the door to his cruiser, shoving Jake and the puppies inside. "Ramirez, get them out of here, now!" Ramirez opened her mouth to argue, but Grady cut her off. "That's an order." The German shepherd didn't wait for the humans to finish debating. He leapt from the ATV, landing hard on his injured leg but refusing to let the pain slow him down. His nose worked overtime, sorting through the night scents: gasoline, gunpowder, the metallic tang of blood. And beneath it all, something else, something familiar. His head snapped up, golden eyes locking onto the tree line across the road. There, half hidden in the shadows, stood the white wolf. Its glowing eyes met his, and for a heartbeat the world seemed to stand still. Then, with a flick of its ear, the wolf turned and vanished into the forest. A command, a summons. The German shepherd hesitated only long enough to nudge Emily's hand with his nose, a silent plea for her to stay safe, before bolting after the wolf. Behind him, Emily's shout of protest faded as he plunged into the trees, his powerful legs carrying him faster, deeper, the underbrush tearing at his wounds but failing to slow him. The forest grew thicker, the moonlight barely piercing the canopy above, yet the wolf's white coat gleamed like a beacon ahead of him, always just out of reach, yet never truly lost from sight. Then, without warning, the trees opened into a small clearing, and the German shepherd skidded to a halt, his breath catching in his chest. Dozens of eyes gleamed back at him from the darkness. Not just wolves, dogs, all the fighters from the cabin, all the strays from the roads, all the broken creatures the vet's ring had discarded over the years. They sat in perfect silence, their gazes fixed on him with an intensity that made his hackles rise. At the center of the clearing, the white wolf stood atop a fallen log, its scarred muzzle lifted to the wind. When it spoke, its voice was a rasp that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The time has come," it said, the words settling like stones in the German shepherd's mind. "The two legs have ruled too long with blood and chains. Tonight, we take back what is ours." A ripple passed through the assembled animals, ears pricking forward, tails stiffening. The German shepherd took an involuntary step back. This wasn't just about rescuing puppies or escaping cruelty. This was something bigger, something dangerous. The white wolf's yellow eyes burned into his. "You have fought well, brother, but the final battle is here. Will you stand with your kin?" From far behind them, back toward the road, came the unmistakable sound of engines approaching. Many engines. The vet wasn't running, he was hunting. The German shepherd turned his head, his ears catching something else beneath the growl of motors. Emily's voice, distant but desperate, calling his name. The white wolf snarled softly, "Choose." The German shepherd's chest heaved as he stood frozen between two worlds, the wild, vengeful call of the wolf pack behind him, and the desperate voice of Emily cutting through the trees ahead. The white wolf's challenge hung heavy in the air, its unblinking yellow eyes demanding an answer. Around them, the gathered dogs and wolves waited in eerie silence, their bodies tense with anticipation. Somewhere beyond the forest, engines growled closer, headlights beginning to pierce the darkness between the pines. The vet was coming with reinforcements, and the German shepherd knew with cold certainty what that meant. More guns, more cages, more pain. A low whine escaped his throat as Emily's voice came again, closer now, raw with fear. "Please, where are you?" The sound of her footsteps crashing through underbrush followed, twigs snapping under her frantic pace. The white wolf's lips peeled back in a silent snarl, its massive paws shifting impatiently on the fallen log. "The two legs will never understand," it rasped. "They chain what they fear and break what they cannot control." Its gaze flicked to the scars crisscrossing the German shepherd's body, the marks of battles forced upon him. "You know this truth in your bones." The German shepherd's ears flattened. He did know. The memories rose unbidden. The bite of metal around his neck, the jeers of men as he was pitted against other dogs, the searing pain of teeth and claws when all he'd wanted was to curl up and whimper. But then other memories surfaced too. Emily's gentle hands bandaging his wounds, her voice soft with worry, the way she'd stood between him and danger without hesitation. His tail gave a hesitant twitch. A twig snapped to his left. The German shepherd turned just as Emily stumbled into the clearing, her clothes torn, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She froze at the sight before her, the sea of animals, the towering white wolf, her dog standing caught between them. "Oh my God," she breathed, her hands trembling at her sides. The white wolf's growl deepened, the dogs around it shifting restlessly. Emily didn't back down. She took a shaky step forward, her eyes locked on the German shepherd. "Come home," she whispered. The word struck him like a physical blow. Home, not a cage, not a chain, a home. The white wolf seemed to sense the shift, its ears pinned back, its body coiling like a spring. "Traitor!" it hissed. The word wasn't aimed at Emily, but at him. The German shepherd felt the pack's mood turn in an instant, their friendly sniffs and wagging tails replaced by bared teeth and raised hackles. Even Max, who'd fought beside him at the cabin, took a step back, his dark eyes conflicted. Engines roared at the forest's edge, doors slamming, men shouting. The vet's voice rose above the chaos. "Find them." "I want that woman and her mutt alive." The German shepherd's muscles tensed. Time was up. Emily reached out a hand, her fingers trembling. "Please." With a sudden, decisive movement, the German shepherd turned his back on the white wolf and crossed the clearing to press his muzzle into Emily's palm. A shudder ran through the assembled animals, some growling in betrayal, others whining in confusion. The white wolf's snarl cut through them all. "Then perish with your masters," it spat before vanishing into the trees, the pack flowing after it like a living shadow. Emily didn't waste a second. She grabbed the dog's collar and ran, crashing back through the undergrowth toward the road. Behind them, gunshots rang out, followed by screams that weren't entirely human. Emily flinched but didn't look back, her grip tightening on the German shepherd's fur as they burst onto the pavement where Grady's cruiser sat idling, Ramirez at the wheel with Jake, and the puppies huddled in the back. "Go, go, go," Grady shouted from the passenger seat as Emily wrenched the door open, practically throwing herself and the dog inside. Tires screeched as Ramirez floored it, the cruiser rocketing down the winding mountain road just as black SUVs swarmed the mill crossing behind them. In the back seat, Jake clutched the puppies closer, his voice barely audible over the engine's roar. "They'll follow us. They never stop." The German shepherd, pressed against Emily's side, felt her fingers dig into his fur. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because as the cruiser rounded a bend, the headlights illuminated a sight that made Ramirez slam the brakes so hard they all lurched forward. The white wolf stood in the center of the road, its coat gleaming like bone in the glare, and behind it, Lining the roadside in perfect formation stood the entire pack. Not attacking, not fleeing, waiting. The wolf's yellow eyes locked onto the German shepherd through the windshield. Then, with deliberate slowness, it stepped aside, clearing the path. A choice. A test. Ramirez's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "What the hell is this?" The German shepherd whined low in his throat, his gaze never leaving the wolf's. He understood. This wasn't surrender. This was something far more dangerous. A warning. Grady reached slowly for his revolver. "Ramirez, drive." The cruiser crept forward, passing the silent watchers on either side. As they cleared the last of the pack, Emily finally exhaled, her breath shuddering. But the German shepherd kept watching out the rear window, his ears pricked, until the white wolf threw its head back in a howl that seemed to shake the very mountains, a sound that promised this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The cruiser's tires hummed against the asphalt as they sped away from the mountains, the first hints of dawn painting the sky, in pale streaks of pink and gold. No one spoke. Jake sat rigid in the back seat, the rescued puppies dozing fitfully in his lap, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. Emily kept one hand buried in the German shepherd's fur, her fingers trembling slightly whenever a distant howl carried on the wind. Grady had his revolver resting on his knee, his eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror. Even Ramirez, normally unshakable, gripped the wheel so tightly her knuckles stood out white. The German shepherd pressed closer to Emily, his ears twitching at every sound. The white wolf's final howl still echoed in his bones, a promise or a threat he didn't fully understand. Part of him ached to have stayed, to have answered that wild call. But then Emily's fingers scratched gently behind his ears, and the warmth of her touch grounded him. He licked her wrist once, tasting salt and fear and something uniquely her. Ramirez broke the silence first. "We need to get off the grid, now." Grady nodded, pulling out his phone. "I know a place, old ranger station near Blackwater Lake. No roads in, just hiking trails." His eyes flicked to Emily. "You up for walking?" She nodded without hesitation. The German shepherd nuzzled her hand, his tail giving a weak wag. Where she went, he would follow. They abandoned the cruiser 3 miles later, hidden deep in a thicket of young pines. Grady distributed supplies from the trunk. Flashlights, a first aid kit, protein bars, while Ramirez wiped down the interior for prints. "They'll find it eventually," she muttered, "but this buys us time." Jake shifted uncomfortably, one of the puppies whimpering in his arms. "What about them?" he asked, nodding to the sleeping forms. "They need real food and a vet." Emily knelt beside the German shepherd, carefully checking his wounds in the growing light. "We all do," she said softly. The bullet graze on his flank had stopped bleeding, but the skin around it was angry and red. His paws were cracked from running, his coat matted with dirt and blood. And yet, when she met his eyes, she saw only steady determination looking back. The hike to the ranger station took hours, their progress slowed by injuries and the need for silence. The German shepherd ranged ahead at times, his nose testing the wind for danger, always circling back to Emily with a soft whiff of reassurance. The forest grew denser, the pine canopy blocking out most of the morning sun, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and resin. It was the German shepherd who smelled the smoke first. His head snapped up, a low growl rumbling in his chest as the acrid tang hit his nose. Grady signaled for everyone to stop, his hand drifting to his weapon. "That's not a campfire," he murmured. The German shepherd didn't wait for permission. He bolted forward, weaving through the trees toward the source, Emily's hissed warnings fading behind him. The ranger station wasn't supposed to be occupied. It was burning. Flames licked up the wooden walls, smoke billowing from the roof as the fire consumed the small building. But worse, far worse, were the figures moving in the clearing. Men in dark jackets, their faces obscured by bandanas, methodically dousing the surrounding trees with gasoline. One laughed as he tossed a match, the underbrush igniting with a whoosh that sent birds screaming into the sky. The German shepherd's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a hideout being destroyed, it was a message, a trap. The vet's people had anticipated their move, and now they were cutting off escape routes, herding them like prey. A twig snapped behind him. The German shepherd spun, teeth bared, only to freeze as a familiar scent hit his nose. Maximum, the Rottweiler, limped out of the brush, his fur singed, one ear badly burned. He whined softly, his dark eyes desperate. Behind him, 3 more dogs emerged, a scarred pit bull, a lanky greyhound mix, and a small terrier missing half its tail. All bore fresh wounds, all reeked of smoke and fear. The German shepherd didn't need words to understand. The white wolf's pack had been attacked, scattered, and now the hunters were closing in from all sides. Max nudged his shoulder urgently, then turned and vanished back into the trees, his meaning clear: follow. The German shepherd hesitated only a second before barking loudly, once, twice, to guide Emily and the others. Then he plunged after Max, his heart pounding. Because if the dogs were running, the danger was closer than any of them realized. The German shepherd followed Max through the dense undergrowth, his muscles burning with exhaustion, but his determination unshaken. The scent of smoke grew thicker, clinging to his fur as he led Emily and the others away from the burning ranger station. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees standing like silent witnesses to their desperate flight. Max moved with purpose despite his injuries, his nose guiding them toward a narrow ravine hidden by thick ferns. As they pushed through the foliage, the ground sloped downward into a sheltered gully where a small, crystal-clear stream trickled over smooth stones. Here, the remnants of the white wolf's pack waited. Dozens of dogs and a few wolves lay scattered along the stream bank, some licking their wounds, others watching the newcomers with wary eyes. The white wolf itself stood atop a flat boulder, its majestic coat streaked with soot, but its presence still commanding. Its yellow eyes locked onto the German shepherd, then flicked to Emily and the humans behind him. For a long moment no one moved. Then, with a soft chuff, the wolf stepped down and approached. Emily held her ground, though her fingers trembled where they rested on the German shepherd's head. The wolf stopped just inches away, its breath warm against her skin as it sniffed her hand. Then, to everyone's shock, it bowed its head, a gesture of respect. The other animals relaxed visibly, some even wagging their tails as Jake and Grady carefully set the puppies down near the water. Max limped forward, nudging the German shepherd toward the center of the clearing. The message was clear. This was his moment, his choice. The German shepherd looked around at the battered but unbroken pack, then back at Emily. He didn't need to speak for her to understand. She knelt beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved them," she said. "You saved all of us." The white wolf let out a soft howl, a sound that was echoed by every animal present. It wasn't a cry of war, it was a song of survival, of unity. As the last notes faded, the German shepherd turned his gaze to the horizon, where the first true light of dawn painted the sky. The fires still burned in the distance, the threat of the vet still loomed, but here, in this hidden sanctuary, something new had been born. A bond between species, a promise of protection. Emily wrapped her arms around the German shepherd's neck, pressing her face into his fur. "We'll make sure no one hurts them again," she vowed. And in that moment, the moral of the story became clear. True strength isn't found in chains or dominance, but in loyalty, compassion, and the courage to stand together against cruelty. The German shepherd licked her cheek once, then turned to face the rising sun beside his pack, his family, knowing their fight was far from over, but they would face it side by side.